Welcome all to the Tortillas Takes podcast. You are on once again with your boy, I'll be sure. And just as much as I like making fun of Jeremy before the pod begins, I especially like when Texas Tech blows out their opponent and us kind of having a stress-free Saturday. We have not had a stress-free Saturday other than playing UNT. That's the only time we've had a stress-free Saturday, right? I don't even know what that felt like. I was like, oh my goodness, I don't have a heart attack at halftime. This is amazing. So to talk about that game, not to mention everything that happened afterwards that did give us many palpitations, we got the Red expert himself, Joe Lopez. What's going on, Joe?
What's going on, Albert? Jeremy, how are you boys doing tonight? Yeah, everything on Saturday kind of going our way. Taj Brooks having himself a day. A lot of the seniors, having their shine for the last time here in the Jones. And yeah, I was there supporting it. I was having my own personal senior day at the football game as I attended with my high school senior herself as the last time that I'll take her to a football game as a senior in high school. So yeah, everything was great on Saturday, before and after. So, and then, all the other stuff of that boulder falling down the hill now, but we'll talk about it.
Has she decided what she's going to do post high school?
She does. We are waiting to hear back from this wonderful university here in Lubbock, Texas, about potentially being a landing spot for her and her future with sports management.
Wayland Baptist. I get it. Hey, man, it's a really good program. It's
LCU's great. LCU's great around this time of the year.
Hey, man, you know what you should do is I got my 3 daughters. I want to do the hats. I like have her do her own I decided to take my next 4 years to have like a construction hat, a construction worker hat, like a few other ones.
Hey man, we'll do it for the spring. Whenever she signs her letter of intent, so we'll figure it out.
There we go. And then also on the other side of things, a dog papa that is the People's Champ, Jeremy Gillen. What's up, Jeremy?
Hello.
Just straight like that. So Jeremy's weekend's going splendidly. Splendidly. Or has gone splendidly up to this point. Apparently, he's gone off the wine or water in a wine glass. I can't tell. But we to kind of wrap up this intro, we do need to talk about Texas Tech playing West Virginia. I'll give it to you straight. Texas Tech mollywopped the Mountaineers. Y'all guys remember when it used to be tough to beat West Virginia? Because it hasn't been. All right. Shout out to Henry Colombi. Before the game, he said that in our house, we don't lose to West Virginia because he dang sure is right. He did not lose to West Virginia no matter what. He lost a lot of other games, but he ain't lose to West Virginia. All right. And so he kind of talked about not losing West Virginia. And we really haven't lost. And it's funny because early on, when West Virginia first came into the conference, we beat them that first time with Geno Smith. And then we kept losing to them. They were beating the hell out of us. And the last few years, though, we have really had their number. And this year was no different, right? Texas Tech's second quarter was amazing. Very similar to the second quarter we had against UNT. 29 points put up in one quarter. Jeremy, how was that second quarter and that first half for you when Texas Tech goes into halftime up 35-3?
I will never condone any form of distracted driving. Let me just say that out loud right now. But as I was heading home from Thanksgiving, because I drove down to College Station, which let me tell you, that's a wild city to get out of Saturday morning. I put the game on in my car. And that second quarter, man, I was going nuts at the back behind my wheel because it was an offensive power. It was just West Virginia was a poverty program, and we were taking advantage of it. I felt just you could do no wrong. And more impressively, our defense was doing a great job at playing multiple defense look, a lot of stunts, a lot of pressure off the edge. Like this was probably one of the most complimentary football efforts against a decent program. that we've seen this season. And, that was really cool to see. So, man, hats off to Joey, I think, especially because when he said it, he's like, hey, this Oklahoma State game, it was a, knockdown shootout. We toughed it out to the end, but we have to give our best effort. Last day, last game at home, senior day, we got to send these guys off right. Did everything in his power to make that happen. And it was cool to watch.
I didn't know where you were going to go with that after the distracted driving thing at the beginning. So I'm very glad that it went to a positive route toward the end. I was like, we're going to have to have a conversation about this. Are you okay, buddy? So I will say it's funny because when the game started out, Texas Tech had 2 possessions where they had to settle for field goals. And it really made me at first feel like, oh, my God, here we go again. We're really gonna, especially the second time we did it. I'm like, oh, this is gonna really come out to bite us in the butt. This is not gonna work. 1st and goal, multiple times in the red zone. This is a recipe for disaster. It's not. We're gonna be terrible. This game's gonna stink. And sure enough, to Jeremy's point, the defense showed up each and every single time, and to where eventually offense did catch a stride. When it caught a stride, it really caught a stride, Joe.
Yeah, everything about it. Taj getting involved, the passing game happening, minus that one interception that Barron threw. I mean, this was almost a flawless, offensive performance for the game. They didn't really sputter. I don't think we punted in this game either. So, I mean, this is one of those deals you just take for what it's worth. And, the last home game of the year, this is the way you'd like to send a lot of these guys out. Josh Kelly, Jalen Conyers and all of these other guys. And the defense, the schematically what DeRuyter had planned up for this game and using a guy like Dingle to shadow Garrett Green, you have a full-on track star shadowing a quarterback. You're not going to really get out of the pocket, easy. So that was really good. And then our secondary played pretty well the course of the game. So it was good stuff all the way around.
Yeah, it really made, it's fun. And Jeremy brought this up because he mentioned that how we beat a decent team. And they're a bowl team, right? They're 6-6. They're a decent team. We've played worse teams throughout the year, right? There's a lot of, if we go through our schedule, obviously Abilene Christian and UNT are worse teams, but Arizona's a worse team, right? Well, actually, if we go through our schedule, not too many worse teams, but Arizona's a worse team. Oklahoma State's a worse team. So the fact that those are 2 teams that we were in a dogfight with in the 4th quarter, and yet we go up against this West Virginia team that is a bowl team, a team that was bowl eligible before this game, a team with the head coach fighting for his coaching life, which obviously didn't bode well. And we just kicked the crap out of it, right? Complimenting football all the way around. The stunts were amazing. You mentioned, Joe, as far as having that somebody spying Garrett Green, which was a worry. Listen, I know we didn't have the preview pod. I predicted West Virginia win. I thought West Virginia was going to win the game for a couple reasons. One, I thought we were all counting our chicken before they hatched. We were already looking at the 8 wins. And in my experience as a Red Raider fan, when we think a win is already going to happen, it ain't happening, right? And then also, Garrett Green is a runner, which is historically has not been good for us. Shout out to Mateer from Washington State, right? And so, but it made me almost question, where the hell was this all year long, right? Like it made me look at it and say, well, defensively, we're killing it. Baron Morton, you mentioned him through that pick, had one of his best games as a quarterback. I'm not talking statistically. I'm talking about just what he was doing on the field. Had one of his best games as a quarterback we've seen all year. Was just zipping it in, doing really well. O-line protecting, and I think that's a big reason why Baron Morton had the game that he had, was because the O-line, he wasn't touched. He was not touched. O-line did a very great job of standing him up in this game to 359 yards total. And then the second half, second half, we were coasting, right? So much so that Joe McGuire was able to think about the college football playoff and what that meant for the Big 12. He spent the whole second half thinking about, what am I going to say in the press conference? He wasn't even worried about the game. He was like, all right, I'm going to really tell them something. Jeremy, this entire game and the vibes were just immaculate.
I'm telling you. And, what's really great is that I turned and to your point about, kind of thinking about the college football, Joey's commentary. Like I turned the game off, kept driving. By the time I got home, I got him back on Twitter. Everybody is talking about, or X, excuse me. everyone is talking about. Did you see what Texas Tech head coach said about the college football playoff? I like that guy. Everybody should be listening to this. Was 90% of the commentary, right? And then 10% of people were like, this guy's from Texas Tech is ass. This team sucks. They would say stuff like this. Was all like the Georgia fans and, people like that who have their opinion. How the SEC people have their opinions about the playoffs already. But I think that, like, you're right. Like, this was just a stress-free Saturday. Boy, let me just tell you, boy, howdy. What a stress-free Saturday. I love it. And we got to 8 wins in the regular season. First time since 2009. Huge win. 3 winning records in conference. Back to Joey McGuire, 3 years, 3 winning records in conference. That feels really good. I don't know. It's just like this is an 8-4 season that has some parity in terms of, like, I'm a little bit disappointed in the way that some of the games went because I felt like we were in better control of that. We could be in a conference championship if things fell a little bit differently, but it didn't, and we're still 8-4. Yeah, TCU game, but it didn't, and we're still 8-4. So it's not like this season. This season was as far away from a disaster as you could imagine.
Joe, is there anything else you want to say about the West Virginia Tech game? I mean, I know usually we spend a whole episode on it, but there's so many more things we got to get to. That this game, I feel like everybody else we don't give 2 craps about it. But Joe, anything else you got?
The rate things are going within the football program. This West Virginia game happened 7 weeks ago, so it's so yeah, I'm done. I'm done talking about it. So it is what it is. We handled business, got Neil Brown fired, which he was already on that hot seat. So everything all fine and dandy in Red Raider land as of 5 p.m. Central Standard Time, Lubbock, Texas, and then boy howdy, how has that changed? So
yeah, if you're a longtime listener of Tortillas Takes, you know how much I trust the climb. And Neil Brown, I still support my boy Neil, all right? But yeah, it was time for him to go. I mean, West Virginia, they got high hopes over there. So real quick about this game, some seniors that had a great final game. Taj Brooks, 23 carries, 188 yards, 3 touchdowns, making it very hard for whoever was going to try to break his record, to ever break his record. I think his name's going to stay on the record books for a while. And he made sure of it. Josh Kelly, Washington State transfer, had a really good senior year here at Texas Tech. 9 catches, 150 yards, really balling out. Shout out to Jalen Conyers, right? Had the Conyers package, which I wish we ran more because it was almost foolproof. Really good job there for Jalen Conyers. As he had 4 catches, 37 yards, but also was really good in blocking. The Conyers package did its thing as well. Jacob Rodriguez is not a senior, but did participate in senior day activities. And so it'll be interesting to see whether he declares for the draft or not. Joe McGuire mentioned that for all the juniors, they do a full-on presentation and say, hey, man, this is what you got coming for you. You may end up getting drafted. Let's go ahead. I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, but I think Taj might have went through senior day last year. But in the same vein, which is, hey, man, this could potentially be your last game in the Jones. Just in case it is, go out and with your wife, go out with your family. Because you might get drafted, which he could. So Jacob Rodriguez did that. CJ Basketball also in his senior day with 8 tackles as well, killing it in the game. Braylon Lux, 5 tackles, 4 solo as well. So a lot of guys, a lot of good performances there. Guys, absolutely. Caleb Douglas, almost forgot him. 3 catches, 50 yards, and a touchdown as well. So great performances all in all. Usually, again, we go over this and we last at least 45 minutes talking about this. But so much more to get to. So with all that being said, first matter of business, let's talk about the Texas Tech regular season for a little bit. So Texas Tech, we are 8-4, right? This 8-4, an 8-win regular season will be the first time we've had an 8-win regular season since I was in school in 2009. That is the last time we had an 8-win regular season. I actually, Jeremy, I don't know if you've ever had an 8-win regular season.
Have not, buddy. Have not.
So, it's been a long while, and I think the funny thing about an 8-win regular season this year, and not only an 8-win regular season, 6 conference wins, which hasn't happened since the heralded 2008 year, right? The quote unquote greatest year in Texas Tech history. That is the last time we have won 6 conference games, right? 3 of 5 plus conference win seasons in a row, tied for the longest streak in Texas Tech history, right? The best start to a Texas Tech career potentially ever. I think the only other person that has a similar start is, of course, Mike Leach. But Mike Leach didn't have back-to-back 5 conference win seasons to start his career here at Texas Tech. So a lot of just great things going here. And for those that, kind of want to fact check me, Mike Leach only had 4 or 5 conference win seasons in his career at Tech. Joey already got 3 in 3 seasons. So absolutely incredible. So if we talk about this season in general, right, guys, an 8-4 regular season, 6-3 conference season, and a year where we beat Abilene Christian by a point, a year where we beat the worst team in the conference by 1 touchdown, a year where people have wanted our offensive coordinator fired, our defensive coordinator fired. There's somebody right now with a hashtag Fire McGuire on his header. Every game we've complained about this coaching staff. Every game we've complained about the quarterback gets complaints against him, right? The O-line gets complaints about them. This has probably been one of the most complained about teams and seasons we've had. Yeah, we won 8 games. Despite all of that, despite starting out a season 1-1, where we got whooped by Washington State and beat Abilene Christian by a point, which would have been, and shout out to Raider Ty, he mentioned before, we lose Abilene Christian, it might be the worst loss in program history. Yeah, we won 8 wins, right? So, Joe, put this season into perspective.
You can't really put anything into perspective about this season. I mean, if you look at the entire season in a whole, like if we didn't see anything up until this point and said, hey, you went 8-4 overall, 5-3. You don't know how you lost. You don't know how you won these games. I think a majority of the Tech faithful would be pretty okay with that season. But seeing what we did see over the course of the year, there are times and there are games out there where you think you may have had that game in the bag, TCU game. And you think that, that almost puts you in the Big 12 championship, year 3. And, this is that big year for coaches to come in, by year 3 is whenever the most progress is supposed to be made, because now you have your recruits in, you have your staff in place, you have everything going. And year 3 is supposed to be a pretty sizable leap. And I think you left some stuff out there, and, it's kind of hard to explain, but, that's kind of why we're called typical Tech University, because of shit like this. Games that you should win big time, like against an Abilene Christian, you go and barely survive, or teams like the worst team in the Big 12, you barely win in by a touchdown, or giving up a 17-point lead on the road in your secondary hotbed for Tech alumni. All these different things, add up over the course of the season. You kind of can't just pinpoint one particular issue itself, but man, there's some things out there that you're going to wish you could have back. But 8-4, I think you could settle for, and then moving forward towards 25.
So Joe, I got a team, right? So this isn't the first year a season like this has happened. All right. Now there was no Twitter or even Facebook, or even there was AIM at this time. But back in 2004, a similar season happened. And so for you youngsters, gather around. And I'm also a youngster. I was a child when this happened.
I was a student.
Joe was a student. I was in high school. I might have been in high school. Either 8th grade or 9th grade. But anyways, 2004, Texas Tech loses to New Mexico. We lost to New Mexico, right? And you may be saying, well, Al, New Mexico, they were probably pretty great that year, right? No, 7-5 Mountain West team. They were not great. It was a bad loss, right? Then we lose to New Mexico, right? Then we beat Kansas by a single point. And Al, but they must have been like like Kansas. They went Eric Mangini in them. No, this is a Kansas team that finished 80th out of 120 teams in Division 1A that year. Yes, kids, it used to be called Division 1A. That's another story for another time. All right. But then we come out and beat the crap out of Nebraska, which shout out to Nebraska. We used to beat them quite a bit. It was very interesting. Right. But then we lose to A&M. The dastardly Aggies later in the season. But then we beat a ranked Oklahoma State team. And we beat Aaron Rodgers in Cal. And that just reminds me that Aaron Rodgers has been around for way too long. But we beat Aaron Rodgers in Cal. That team finished 8-4. That team had inexcusable losses and shocking wins. So compare that to this team that beats Abilene Christian by a point, beats the worst team in the Big 12 by a touchdown, but yet somehow finds a way to win on the road against ranked Iowa State, finds a way to beat Arizona State in the game. Like, in hindsight, Arizona State and Iowa State are in the Big 12 championship game. Arizona State, I'm not going to say it was stress-free, but from start to finish, we were winning that game. We had that game at an arm's length. That was probably, other than West Virginia, the best win we've had all season, where the only other game where I'm like, we're not going to lose this game, right? And those are the two teams that we beat, right? So our two best wins are against the two teams that are in the conference, the Big 12 championship, with a chance to go to the college football playoff. And if we don't have a defense that gives up 2 touchdowns in the final 10 minutes in the TCU game, maybe we're there instead. So it's very interesting that so we do have a season like this. And as you all know, greater things happened after this 2004 season, right? Actually, after the 2004 season, we had the 2005 season, where we were ranked as high as 10th in the country. We had one of the greatest seasons in Texas Tech history before 2008, and that was really when Mike Leach put his stamp as one of the best coaches in the nation. So I'm just saying it's there, Jeremy. The stuff is there. We've seen it before, and we know it can happen again. So, what is your perspective on this overall season?
And I'm just going to say, one of on this podcast picked us to go 8-4. I'm just saying. Just a knower of ball. Said at the beginning that 8-4 was the reality, and you know where we're at right now, boys. I kind of mentioned it. There are elements of the season that were disappointing, that are still disappointing, that I wish we could get back and get another chance at. But that's not how it works, right? So looking at where we are and kind of the scope of what we've done this season has been very impressive. Like, again, a banger tweet that had no reason being a banger, just like quote tweeting the conference championship preview, Iowa State, Arizona State. And I was like, damn, we beat both these teams. That's crazy. That this Texas Tech team has found a way to win important games when everybody is all in on that. And I think that's been a special thing about the Joey McGuire tenure so far, is that, we've won games that in the past, no business winning, right? And the Arizona State games are a really good example. And yeah, Arizona State earlier on in the year was a little more suspect, and they kind of got it together. But, we still held Scatterboot to his, like, one of his lowest rushing of the year. We stifled when we played against their defense really well. It was a great game all around. And now they're a team that people are like, should they be in the college football playoff? I'm like, that's crazy, and if we do a couple of different things differently, then we're in that conversation, right? And so to be on the edge of, people are not just Texas Tech fans, but now pundits from other places, Kirk Herbstreit even, God forbid, he tweeted about Texas Tech being on his list of schools that have programs that have had surprisingly good seasons that nobody's talking about. It's like people are taking notice that things are kind of changing here at Texas Tech. And that's a really nice feeling, even when, and I'm not going to shame anybody who at the end of the season is like, I wanted more, because it felt like you could have gotten more, and you really could have, but we didn't. So this season has been a really satisfying season to me. The recent 24 hours have been really weird and uncomfortable, and we'll talk about that. But before that, getting that West Virginia win, I was just like, we freaking did something incredible this year. And I totally the rest of it's bupkis. Like the rest of it's just white noise. You'll never remember. And they actually mentioned it in the West Virginia game with that Mason Tharp catch that didn't end up getting ruled a catch. The worst thing about stuff like that is that will never be on a highlight reel. And I think there's a lot of truth to that, to like the season as a whole, of like, there's a bunch of stuff that in the moment I was mega pissed about. And now I don't even remember what I was mad about. Like there are certain things I still will remember, but for the most part, I don't know. The TCU game. But like for the most part, we got 8 wins, man. It's pretty nice.
I do wish with the Mason Tharp catch, the rule of cool, man. If it's cool enough, it's a questionable, and it's cool enough, let it go. Let it ride.
Let it go, dude. Let it go.
Know? I will say, so this is where I disagree with you, though, is I have started to get a little bit of a problem with how many the want it more. And I'll explain. I think it's human nature to only look at the what could have been. However, my dear friend Jeremy, there's also the other side of what could have been, right? We beat Abilene Christian by a single point, right? We got lucky. They went for 2, didn't get it. We beat Abilene Christian by a single point. We beat Cincinnati because they missed their game-tying field goal. That could have been a loss in overtime. Arizona, if Jared Rodriguez does not punch out that ball from one of the best wide receivers in the country, we probably lose that game, right? Iowa State had an opportunity to lose that game. We only beat them by 1 point. Oklahoma State, we only beat them by 1 possession. That's 5 games. 5 games where we came out on the positive side. Meanwhile, we're always sitting back and saying, oh, man, what if we had beaten TCU and had better officiating against Colorado? Like, that's 5 teams looking at that, 5 teams looking at that Texas Tech game like, man, we could have beat them. Arizona State, we just mentioned how we have them at arm's length. We had Arizona State, shout out to Chris Cartman, because I do like him. But we had him talking about a lot of Arizona State fans look at Texas Tech like, we should have beat them. Like, so if they look at it, there's 5 other teams that are like, man, we could have beat them. So yeah, I do look at it both ways.
I was thinking that we're not 3-8 or whatever.
Yeah, like
3-9.
I'm like, don't get me wrong. I look at the TCU game and I'm like, man, if only for that, we'd be in the Big 12 championship, right? But I also know that, thank God, Jacob Rodriguez punched the ball out against Arizona, because that game looked like a loss. I was sitting there and I'm like, I've seen this play before.
And that would have been a very bad loss as the season that went on.
So like I don't know. I get the whole, man, we could have been 9-3, could have been 10-2 with the officiating in this car. I get all of that. But I also look at, like you said, the other side of like, we could have been 3-9. So I will take it how I can get it. Right. 8-4 is still the best year we've had in 15 years, guys. 15 years. I have spent my time complaining about Joey McGuire and him wanting to go for it on 4th down on our side of the field. And some of his game, I still think his game management leaves to be desired. I get all of that. Right now, the popular thing to criticize Joey on is the lack of development amongst the players that he recruits. Right. And then, of course, we're going to get into the next thing to criticize Joey on. But, guys, he's had the greatest start, or one of the greatest starts in program history. He just finished a season where it's the best season in 15 years. Finished a stretch that ties the greatest conference stretch ever. And we're going to look at it with a sour push just because, but Oklahoma's not in the conference anymore. Like, we had the guy beat Oklahoma and Texas in his first year, something that nobody done. Like, I don't know. I'm one of Joey's biggest critics, but sometimes we got to take a step back and say, like, what the hell are we doing? Joe, am I wilding?
No, you're not. I mean, facts are facts, right? I mean, that's all you're saying. It's just these are the facts here. I was 25 the last time we had a record like this. I'm 40 now. Like, I mean, that's absurd. My daughter, who's a senior in high school, was 2. It's like now it's just like,
what are you doing?
All the, yeah, like you know how long I've been waiting for this.
Yeah.
Like, it's easy to criticize because it's there's a lot of things that are more just pure stupidity to a degree, to where it's just you're left like, you can't really be doing this, or you can't really be doing that. And it's easy to criticize Joey in that regard, but as far as what he's put on the field and getting the job done, especially in these 1 possession games, I mean, sometimes it's really good and sometimes it's not. But they're making the plays whenever you need to. And just like you said, as easy as it could be a 3-9 season, we still found a way to get the job done in certain aspects of these games. So you got to tip your hat to McGuire for that.
Absolutely. And I'm pretty sure when it comes to stuff like this, I think the main thing that McGuire does is he tips his hat at Charlie Hustle. Make sure to go to charliehustle.com to get 15% off of all non-sale items using our promo code. That's 101215 TN1215 to get that 15% off. Charlie Hustle wants you to be the best dressed fan this season. They're based out of Kansas City, home of the best team in the AFC or in the NFL, Kansas City Chiefs. Home of Patrick Mahomes, right? Former Red Raiders. So make sure to get that Texas Tech Pat Mahomes stuff. Get some of that vintage Texas Tech stuff because Charlie Hustle is where vintage is made fresh. Use our promo code 101215 TEN1215. Again, 15% off of all non-sale items. So it wasn't all fine and dandy, Jeremy, afterwards. So that was Saturday. Saturday happened. It was crazy. Sunday is when things really start to get off its rocker. So before we get to the coaching aspect of it, somebody left. And I ain't talking about the coaches. I'm talking about the guy that we've talked about on this podcast a few times, probably the most talked about player that doesn't play, Micah Hudson, former 5-star, first quote-unquote 5-star, quote-unquote first 5-star ever in Texas Tech history. And I put it in air quotes mostly because we've had other 5-stars that just get their stars reduced because they go to Texas Tech. That's neither here nor there. But no question, he's the greatest recruit in Texas Tech history. And this year, he played in, 6 games, sparingly, barely. Had a really good catch against Arizona. Did a lot of coaching staff used him in ways that were very head-scratching. And sure enough, the day after the final game of the regular season, we see his name in the transfer portal, something that I think fans have been figured was going to be on the wall for the last 3 weeks. Jeremy, what are your thoughts on Micah Hudson, 5-star wide receiver, only being in Tech for 1 year and then transferring out?
We are in the golden age of NIL, the Wild West of NIL. I think that this is a hard reality that a lot of schools are going to go through. They're all going to look contextually different, but getting to this point is the confusing part. Like getting to this point, Texas Tech wise, right? Recruiting Micah Hudson, saying what we said about Micah Hudson, saying what we said during the season about Micah Hudson's red shirt being burned, Micah Hudson's in an injury report now, and all of a sudden Micah Hudson's hitting the transfer portal, and then everybody and their mom has an opinion about why that is. We had somebody in our own mentions talking about TSI scores. Just like, buddy, we are going somewhere with that one. I need a lot more information. I do. And it sucks because this is one of those things where we're going to get what we get and they're going to keep what they keep. And we're not going to know anything more. And you can fly through all the message boards you want. But a lot of it's going to just be conjecture. And so I think that, we can't really get so butthurt that a 5-star athlete who didn't get to play in the first season in this era of NIL wants to leave and go try to find somewhere to, if he is looking for more money, make more money. If he's looking for more playing time, I guess. I don't know. But there's so many like rabbit holes to dive down because one, how are you not making enough money at Texas Tech? Like, because you're making money, right? 2, how are you expecting now that the season is over? Where do you think you're going to go that's going to give you more playing time than presumably he's going to get next year with Texas Tech? If playing time isn't the issue, then what is, right? We hear rumors. Like, he can't read the playbook, okay? Well, if he can't read the playbook, how are we not giving him simpler things to do? We joke about it like doing punt return for your freshman year. Get some, something. So, like, this whole scenario for me is just so frustrating because everybody's got an opinion and there are 0 facts out there right now. Now, if he transfers to Florida Atlantic, then I'll be like, hey, I see the connection.
Joe, what are your thoughts there?
You guys saw the tweet I put out there. I've met him a handful of times. I'm not, it's none of my business why he wants to transfer out of Texas Tech. I mean, we could do speculation after speculation, just like Jeremy said. Everybody on message boards is going to have their own opinion. I've heard from stuff as far as, oh, we haven't paid him yet, just like that UNLV quarterback situation, that he's still awaiting money and checks haven't cleared yet. So that's why he's out. He's like, oh, this Texas Tech hasn't, followed through on what they promised me. And then I've heard the playbook stuff plenty of times. I've heard the injury stuff plenty of times, that he has this foot deal now, and he wasn't happy with how he was managed in his, his recovery. I mean, nobody's ever going to know the full truth to this, other than Micah's camp and, some of the Tech people that are really close with this, and everything else is going to be speculation. So as much as I don't think it's money related, I don't think it's playbook related, because like I said, I think there's other things you could do with that kind of athlete, to where you don't have to necessarily put so much on learning a playbook and a system to help guys get on the field. Like Jeremy said, the punt returning deal, or whatever the case may be out on the football field. I think, there's some people that, and we were talking about this pre-pod, some people are book learners. Some people could get into a book and read it and read a playbook, and this is how they learn. Some people have to go out there and do it on a day in and day out basis. I mean, it is what it is at this point in time, but I'm not going to sit here and speculate why he's leaving Texas Tech. I just, it's none of my business, but I, do wish him the best, because like I said in my tweet itself, he called me yes sir, no sir. He acknowledged me by name, but he still said yes sir, no sir. I mean, he treated me up with the most up respect, like I was some big time donor, and I only donate $50 a month. It's not nothing, not Cody Campbell kind of money. So, whatever he seeks, man, I hope he succeeds, because he's a hell of a talent, as we all know.
No, absolutely. So I think, so real quick with the playbook thing, most true freshmen don't grasp the playbook. Like that's I mean, that excuse is this not the NFL, guys? Like, what the hell are we even talking about? You know what I mean? It's pretty normal that he doesn't have the entire playbook just down, if that is the case, right? That's not, like you were saying, you make things simple, put them in packages. I think if Florida was able to find a way to get Tim Tebow out there his freshman year, despite having a Chris Leak on the way to win a national championship, you can find ways. And mind you, I've been somebody that has, y'all listen to me all year. I don't care about Micah Hudson not playing ahead of Caleb Douglas, Coy Aiken, and Josh Kelly. Those three, they're the starters, and they deserve to be the starters. They have been a really good wide receiving class. However, when I see him not getting snaps ahead of Jordan Brown and Vasson, it's start to question it a little bit, right? No disrespect to those guys. Those guys, I think, are going to be good receivers, but Micah Hudson should be getting. I think the worst come to worst, if you're not playing him, okay, you want to redshirt, preserve eligibility, cool. Then you burn that. I'm like, what are we even doing here? And we mentioned it before in the pod of like, now it just seems like y'all just putting him out here just to appease him and fans, and that doesn't even make it doesn't even make sense. You're putting him in bad situations, and so this doesn't surprise me that he is he entered the portal for whatever reason it is. I'm not gonna it's similar to Joe. I'm not really gonna speculate on it, but it doesn't shock me. I think there was definitely a mismanagement of him while at Texas Tech, and I can't really blame him. All this being said, the fan base overreaction has been a bit ridiculous, right? Not just the coping mechanism of, oh, well, he didn't know the playbook, but also the other piece of, we don't need to pay him anyway, or like some of the what's the other piece of, I've been seeing a lot of the flip side of it, where it's like, oh, we'll never get a 5-star again. This will never happen again. We're a poverty program. This will never happen again. Like all this, like, guys, re-effing lax. All right. Like, it's not, I think both sides of the thing is getting a bit ridiculous and crazy. But
one more thing to add on that also is, like, you think if he wasn't as gassed up as he was in the offseason to, at the start, oh, he's going to be starting game one, oh, generational talent, this, that, and the other. Like, I mean, you overly hyped this kid up, and you got the fan base to buy into all of this, knowing he was a 5-star, knowing this and that, and ultimately to do this to him, that was, that's mismanaged to the highest of echelons, man. Is bad.
Yeah.
That's my critique. That's the critique I have in this. And maybe it's McGuire not, I suppose, recognizing the implication of like being the high school coach, man, you can amp up, you can be excited. There's no similar gravity in that environment, in that arena. But here, whenever you've got people pouring a bunch of money into a prospect, and then you've got a fandom that far outreaches anything that he's had, especially Texas Tech people, we boy, you have to have more tact. Like you said, Joe, I think you have to have more foresight. You have to be a lot more reserved with certain things. And I know that we love Joey's like passion and excitement about this program and about student athletes. And like a part of why he gets the guys that he gets is because of his charisma. But you have to start finding a way to be reserved enough that you're not putting your foot in your mouth, because now you have a 5-star say, all right, I'm out. And who knows what he's going to say if in the post of it. Like, is he going to go the Elijah Fisher route and say like, stuff on a podcast and be like, they were just doing too much of this, blah, blah, blah. Or is he going to just forget us entirely? Who knows? But the messaging is that, McGuire hyped up the messaging that is out there. I think that you don't want to be out there, but the reality is that it is that McGuire has hyped up a high caliber recruit, then did not come through with that. It was unmet hype, unmet expectations. And so if I'm a high caliber recruit, and if he starts coming at me with that, in the back of my mind, or in the back of an agent's mind or family's mind, they may be thinking Texas Tech had a baller wide receiver, and they have a very pass heavy offense, and they decided not to integrate him. Right? Is it the truth? No, there's a bunch that they don't know. But it's because they don't know that they're going to try to draw their own conclusions. And so that kind of stuff, we're going to have to come back from this by getting people more integrated.
By getting another 5-star and figuring it out that way. I will say, though I don't think this will really affect recruiting from us. I do think, however, everything you just said, Jeremy, is what our rivals will say. Right, like I think Baylor and TCU will say that, and so you just have to make sure you have an answer for it, right? So there's that. Not to get lost in this mud, he wasn't the only one that left from Texas Tech. Another just very important piece that left from Texas Tech was Jake Strong. That's right, Jake Strong has entered the transfer portal as well. Our 4th-string quarterback, whatever shall we do? Friend of the pod, was on the podcast a few years ago, so shout out to Jake Strong. I hope you do well. Jalen Peoples also entered the transfer portal. I don't think we've ever said a negative thing about Jalen Peoples on this podcast. I've only thought it. So I think we're
you did there. After the ACU game, but I won't go back and pull that
tape. That's okay. Well, dang it. I'm trying to keep it nice and clean. All right. But we did end up firing Tim DeRuyter. So, Jeremy, that's your boy. I know you like TD. I know you like Tim DeRuyter. He was also the defensive coordinator for the 123rd ranked defense in the country. So, what are your thoughts about this firing?
I'm grieved. I'm deeply grieved. I'll say from a business perspective, numbers only, it makes sense, right? I don't know what what his season goal was, but he seemed that he did not meet his targets, and McGuire made a business decision, right? We've kind of joked and maybe fearfully criticized McGuire for being too loyal to his coaching staff. And at least on my end, that was it was aligned more with Kitley, with some of his more boneheaded decision-making times. But this time, the hammer fell down on DeRuyter. And while I understand the numbers game, this was such a weird season where the numbers were in favor of the offense not in favor of the defense. The eye test was generally not as favorable for the offense because like the dry spells were huge. But then on the defense, you felt like with the conditions you were under, you were making for Texas Tech football what felt like more improvements, right? More scoring defense opportunities, a lot more impressive stands in the red zone after McGuire and Kitley decided to go for it on 4th when it's on the 30, fake punts on your own side of the field. And, DeRuyter keeps them to 3. Like those were measurable areas of success for me that I think were great. I think that DeRuyter did a lot with very little, very banged up defense, very young defense. We lost a lot of production from last season. But at the end of the day, like this is a business. And if we want to be better, we have to be better. And we can't sit below. And I'll say we probably can't sit below the 60 mark, the 70 mark of total defense if we're going to be serious about competing for the conference. Although this conference does make it hard generally for anybody to get kind of higher than that. But, I think he was a great coach. I think he had a lot of wisdom and experience. I hate to see him go. I think that I was hoping that like, hey, next year, a little bit more experience, maybe some key transfers, and he would have been in his bag, but we don't want to wait that long. And I can't fault the staff for following the numbers.
Joe?
Yeah. That's almost perfectly said. There's just not as numbers don't lie, as much as you got to take the friendship and the camaraderie and all of that stuff out of this entire picture. McGuire made the decision, and I would hope this was ultimately McGuire's decision to let him go. But, it's a numbers game. Like Jeremy said, if the numbers don't match up and you're trying to be competitive in, the Big 12 for the foreseeable future, these are places where you're going to have to get better. And it definitely didn't work out this year for him. Hell of a coach, hell of a guy, but I see why they did it. So it just sucks.
He had the 123rd ranked defense in the country. We talked about it a couple weeks ago about how is the last. So real quick, before I even get to what I was about to say, the last 2 years I think have made us fans of DeRuyter. But even as I look back in our last 2 years, were really good defensive years by Texas Tech standards, right? However, they were 2 middle-of-the-road years. We were a middle-of-the-road defense in the Big 12. We were a middle-of-the-road defense nationally. By Tech standards is not how we can really rate our defense. So any other school in the country that would have 2 defenses back-to-back years that were middle of the road, middle of the pack in the last year, the worst or the second worst in the conference, they get fired. Every other school in the country. But by Texas Tech standards, we're saying, oh, well, he had 2 of the best defensive seasons we've had in 15 years. Well, yeah, but Cliff Kingsbury was a head coach of like the worst defenses ever, right? So I kind of, to me, and we talked about it a few weeks ago about how it's hard to keep a guy like that around when the defense was bad, especially when you look at it and say, this defense was better. We have a 10-win season. Like it's as simple as that. Like this defense was just average, just an average defense. We are a top 15 team right now, playing for a Big 12 championship and a college football playoff appearance. And the TCU game is not even close to what we're talking about. We're talking about, oh man, maybe we could have beaten Baylor, right? And like that's what we're looking at right now with an average defense, not even a good defense, an average defense. We are sitting here and saying, can we believe we're about to beat Arlington next weekend? So I think when it comes to that, you can't keep him, right? The flip side of things, the guy that I've been complaining about that has been the Texas Tech scapegoat, which is Zach Kitley, that everybody did want fired, even though he is, by all points and measures, one of the best. He's the architect of one of the best offenses in the country, right? I mean, we're. I think with this last game, I think we went back into first place in the conference when it comes to points per game. He has done a good job, and actually, again, you look back on his first couple of years when everybody said he was terrible, and numbers don't lie. we've had good offenses nationally all 3 years. No wonder Florida Atlantic wanted to steal him away. Sure enough, Zach Kittley didn't get fired, but the next day, Monday, he gets the call from Florida Atlantic saying, we want you to make you the youngest head coach in the country. And so now we're replacing 2 coordinators. So I'm going to start with you again, Jeremy. As much as TD was your boy, ZK was not. So how do you feel about the fact that ZK was initially retained, but then found greener pastures?
I mean, we talked about it already. I'm not surprised that he was retained. I said on the last time we talked about this that I thought the whole staff would make it. I thought that they would just run it back and, hey, Zach, you don't have Taj anymore. Make something happen. DeRuiter, you've got a more seasoned defense now. Make it happen. And then the next year would be like are you rising to the challenge or not? And so for Kittley to take the FAU job, for me, in my mind, that's a heart posture thing. That tells me that Kittley really wants to be a head coach and wants to make that move. And that was the opportunity that presented itself. So no hate, man. Like if that's what you want to do, all power to you. I hope that you have more success than our previous offensive coordinator that did the same thing. Okay. But I don't care that you're gone. Like I don't care. Let me tell you something. We don't care. Not because he's not putting up the right numbers. I think that I'm just not in love with his offensive style. And I think that the inconsistency, people want to talk, and a criticism that I saw about the defense was almost equally critical on the offense without saying it. But it was, how is the defense sustaining the offense through the scoring droughts? My brother, some of our scoring droughts were insanely long, and the defense was doing way more than it should have to keep Zach Kittley in the game. If you have like this creative mind that was tokened as like one of the most offensively creative minds in college football right now, and he can't find a way to score in what was that, like 13 minutes against a pretty average teams. I don't know. I feel like we can replicate that with somebody else, right? So the development likewise wasn't really there for me. I think offensively, I don't think we took somebody and elevated them. And you can't really tell me. So like Taj Brooks is the last bastion. Taj Brooks and Barrett Morton are the last bastions of Matt Wells. And people seem to forget that Matt Wells recruited those guys. And, Barrett Morton hasn't like electrified the way that we expected after that Oklahoma State game. Oh, those years back. But Taj Brooks certainly did. But Taj was going to do that anyways, right? Taj just needed to be Taj. Outside of that, I can't really pin down anybody that Kittley has taken and created into like this NFL super stud the way they did with Bailey Zappi. And so again, I come back to like, I want to put it on a mug, but like without Bailey Zappi, you don't really have a Zach Kittley. So I think that he is like an above average offensive coordinator who had a lot of good breaks. I would love for him to be a great head coach at FAU, but I think that our play style kind of needs to adjust in order for us to be a powerhouse in the Big 12 and not just a kitschy offense, no defense team.
Well, can I just say, you can't just say that like Taj Brooks is the Bailey Zappi level type of player. So I give him credit for Taj Brooks. Funny enough, it's funny about me giving him credit for Taj Brooks because for the 3 years everybody complained about how much he wasn't running Taj Brooks, but then Taj Brooks just went on to break the all-time record primarily with Zach Kittley as his offensive coordinator. Joe, are you sad or frustrated that Zach Kittley's gone?
I'm not sad. I'm not really frustrated about it either. We
or happy. Sorry, that was the other.
I mean, if you're thinking about the age of Zach Kittley, we weren't going to retain him, even if he had stellar offenses, year in, year out. We weren't going to retain him anyway. So I mean, this was his ultimate goal anyway. His goal was to be a head coach somewhere. So if his offenses are taking off, that's why he left Western Kentucky for Texas Tech, to just further, push along his line to getting a head coaching gig somewhere. And,
Mhm.
he did what he had to do. I mean, he had, I think, was Bradley. I think he was a freshman All-American wide receiver year one. And then year two is whenever he regressed and all of that other stuff. You have the Tosh Brooks deal, 1,500-yard seasons, rushing consecutively. And I think there you left a lot on the bone there from last year because you refused to run him in certain situations. And the tempo offense, I don't necessarily think fits what Texas Tech needs to do sometimes, because that gets us in a whole lot of trouble sometimes, especially whenever we do go on those droughts of not being able to do anything with the ball. Then now you're rushing your defense back out there, a minute and a half later, 45 seconds later, and they're just got done, a 9-10 play drive holding them to a field goal. And you just go and you kind of like shit the bed on the offensive side of the ball. I'm not happy that he's gone. Like I said, I think he was going to leave at some point in time by his own doing, just because, head coaching was his end goal for himself. But I do think there are some offensive coordinators out there, different minds that, could propel this offense a little bit further, moving forward.
One thing I will say is I actually think he's going to kill it at FAU. I do find it hilarious that FAU's last hire was Tom Herman, who was a disgraced Texas coach. And then they just said, you know what? We need a young Texas Tech coach. That's what we need. But I think he's going to kill it at FAU, actually. I mean, a guy that loves speed, loves having speedy offenses back in a G5 setting. Like, I think he's going to be absolutely great.
And with the departure of Gus Malzahn, you have, all of those recruits, opening their stuff back up, maybe he gets in on that hotbed of, recruits there in the Florida area. So who knows? They may be good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, I mean, listen, I think just as much as I think it was hard to keep a guy like Dewart around with the numbers there, I think it was hard to keep Kittley around with the numbers on the opposite end. Like somebody's going to grab him up. I personally thought he was going to get another year before getting these type of calls, but I don't blame FAU for saying, let's get somebody like Zach Kittley in here. I think what makes it's going to be difficult for Texas Tech is now we got to replace two coordinators. And Joel McGuire is not a coordinator. He never was, but he never has been. Right, so he needs to find two guys that can handle. Sorry, I'm having allergies like crazy. He need to find two guys that can manage their own sections. All right, one guy that's already out of the running is Dana Holgerson, who just signed a $1.2 million deal to be the offensive coordinator in Nebraska. So shout out to Nebraska for putting up the dough. But we're gonna have to spend the money to get really good coordinators to bring their way over here. I know we've heard of some potential thoughts over on the defensive coordinator side of the things that is exciting. But as we all know here at Texas Tech, we care about what that offense is going to look like. So one question I have for you, Joe, starting off is that are we sticking with the air raid? Because I know me personally, I want to spread it out. Like, I know we don't have Taj anymore, so it has been a little bit more balanced as Taj, especially this year, since Taj Brooks has been the running back. But we were talking in the chat about how I thought next year we were going to see the offense Zach Kittley actually wants to run. That's a little bit more pass heavy, especially now that, I mean, our star running backs are going to be Jacoby Williams, who is an A-back flyer, receiving back that's elusive, Cameron Valdez, who's similar, a little bit bulkier than Williams, but still similar. So we only have one true running back. And the freshman that was here and took his time a little bit this year. So it's so with that, are we sticking with an air raid, or do we need to have something that's a little bit more balanced?
I think we need to have some. Yeah, I think we need to go to the opposite end of the spectrum. I think we need to have something a little bit more balanced. I mean, if you think about, hopefully we're keeping, or you would think right now, Will Hammond is going to be the quarterback of the future. Baron Morton's not going to be this guy. Ultimately, he may not be the guy next year. Nobody knows this in an open competition with a new offensive coordinator, what kind of offense is going to be out there. But I think if you're going to do something more balanced, you got to have a better athlete at a quarterback position. And I think Will Hammond's a better athlete than Baron Morton is. And I think he has all the other measurables and things like that you gauge a quarterback on. Poise, moxie, the whole nine. I mean, he has arm strength. I think that, it'd almost be simpler if you had a more of a balanced attack. And we don't know. I would assume that just based on what we do in and out of the transfer portal with some of these guys that are leaving these other programs and things like that, and how we decide to attack, if we're going to just, stick to the trenches, or if we're just going to go hit pretty much every best available player that's out there, and then we're just going to make this work. I think a lot of it has to do with that. Maybe not so much what we do in this bowl game and seeing what we have in some of these younger faces and stuff like that. But I do think, it's going to be based something on that transfer portal and what kind of guys we get in here just to, push this offense and ultimately push this defense forward into next season.
Jeremy?
No. Give me pro style offense. I've been saying this for a little.
Pro-style offense. That's such a change.
I'm telling you, man. I think.
Wishbone.
Why not, man? Give me the eye formation. Give me that innovative eye that Kitley came up with. I just no. Remember when we ran the? Well, yeah. Listen. So I've been thinking about this a little bit actually. That and I'm actually remembering the Michigan game now that we're talking about it. I mean, they threw the ball like not very much at all and won the national championship. They had so many rushing yards in that game against Washington. I was like, why throw the ball when you could just ground and pound somebody to death, right? But I just think of, when we look at teams when we look at university, when programs that are taken seriously, a lot of them run more pro style ball because what they're illustrating is that they want to get athletes to the next level. And so I think a part of that prestige comes with, getting athletes ready. You avoid, in a pro style offense, you avoid conversations like, oh, system quarterback, inflated numbers, blah, blah, blah. I think it gives you a lot more affordability with the kind of recruits you bring in. Joe is right. A lot is going to be determined on the kind of guys that we have available and get into the portal. But there's I think of good quarterbacks, versatile offensive lines, strong runners. I think being able to control a line of scrimmage is something that pro style offenses are very known for. That's the kind of stuff that I want for Texas Tech, is to have an offense that can just kind of dominate in either facet that they need to, right? And in doing so, getting players ready for the next level, because I think that's the kind of stuff that starts to attract more top tier talent, is because they're already thinking about the next level, and giving them an offense that is going to help kind of showcase their abilities as an athlete, and maybe not wear our offensive line out so much might be more favorable. A full pro style, no, because Texas Tech will have, you can't just switch that in 1 year, especially with the guys that we have. But I think that you can move towards a lot more of a balanced offensive scheme, and I think that Texas Tech really needs to focus on doing that as we get into this, because Texas Tech's been doing spread and air raid for so long, but we've not got a Big 12 championship with that. So if it ain't working, maybe we need to find something that's going to slow the pace of play, higher position, time of possession, right? Stuff like this. These are the ideas that we should be exploring. I'm not saying it has to be, but if we want to become the Big 12 champion, it's not happened so far with what we've been doing. What can we change to kind of get there?
The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over again, expecting a different result. So I don't know about the eye formation, but I do agree with both of you in that balancing out the offense in general, I think, is going to be a good piece there. So got to get out of here because Jeremy is holding me to it. But other things to note: UCF firing Gus Malzahn. I did not expect that one. UCF did have a disappointing season this year. I know coming into the year, I thought they were going to be actually really good in a dark horse Big 12 candidate. But that's a job I would love to have that job right there. You're in a hotbed. Recruiting's been good, right? So whoever replaces Gus Malzahn is going to really be in a good situation there. And then also, of course, you mentioned it, West Virginia firing Neil Brown finally. The buyout finally was at a level that was more appetizing. West Virginia has now just as good of a job I think UCF is. I don't think West Virginia is that good of a job. I think that is a place with it's for all the reasons, it's a similar job to Texas Tech in that it is a place with high expectations. But despite the fact that it has high expectations, you are it's tough to recruit out there. It is and it has not had good success recently. The only thing that I think makes Texas Tech a better job is that it's in Texas. Texas. So that helps. We're in a hotbed for recruiting. For West Virginia, I used to live not too far from there. Not too much of a hotbed out there, right? You got Pennsylvania, and you got Western Pennsylvania and Eastern Ohio, and that's about it. So, and a little bit of Virginia, but so I don't think it's not an easy place to win, and so we'll see what goes on over there. But that is a place that they got the money and they'll spend the money, and they have just as high expectations as us Red Raiders do. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But one thing I hope from them is that they hire a coach that still allows us to kick their ass every year. And I didn't say that. Neil Brown said that. So, Jeremy, anything else you want to say to the people?
It's going to be an interesting offseason again.
What type of evil laugh was that? Joe, anything else you want to say to the people?
Right, Jeremy? No, man, just like, bowl season's upon us. We have conference championships this upcoming weekend, and we'll also find out where we end up in the bowl season, and then who knows, maybe we'll hear some coaching news in the next couple of days, maybe not. Transfer portal is alive and well. What kind of money are we going to be spending out there for some of these guys in the trenches on the boundaries, to help facilitate some of these losses on our offense and defensive side of the ball. So we'll see. But other than that, man, yeah, we're ready to rock and roll. We'll be here for it.
We will definitely be here for it. We do have an episode later this week as we transition to basketball. That's right. The men's basketball team is doing some things. Some good, like beating the hell out of Northern Colorado and beating them by 25. Some not so good, losing a point to St. Joseph's and only beating Syracuse by 5. And you may say, but it's Syracuse. That's good, right? You haven't watched Syracuse for the past half decade. So with that, we'll talk about that as well as, like Joe said, get us some bowl projections. Let's see where we're at. I'm going to also don't listen to Brett McMurphy when it comes to bowl projections because that don't even make sense. The Armed Force. Let me tell you something. We ain't going to the Armed Forces Bowl. That don't even make sense. I don't even think it's possible for us to go to the Armed Forces Bowl. I mean, I guess technically it is. I mean, but it ain't happening. So, anyways, for the Red Raider expert that is Joe Lopez, for the People's Champ Jeremy Gillen, this is your boy Albie Shore, and you have been listening to the Tortillas and Takes podcast, part of the 1012 Network. As always, stay wrecked, people.